They say your wedding day is the start of a new chapter, a beautiful symphony of love. For me, it was the day the music stopped, and a jarring, ugly truth shattered every note. My name is Sharon, and I was supposed to be walking down the aisle of an old grand cathedral, a building a man I trusted claimed he helped design. Instead, I stood in my own living room, my white silk dress feeling like a costume, watching the two people I loved the most destroy everything I had built. My fiancé, Michael, a respected architect, and my dearest cousin, Leona, a bright incoming teacher I had mentored for years, were in my bed. Not sleeping, but intertwined in a betrayal so profound, it felt like a physical blow. Just 6 months ago, my life was a meticulously planned blueprint. At 35, I was a respected professor at a prestigious teachers' college, specializing in early childhood development and the Montessori method. My days were a fulfilling blur of lecture halls, lesson plans, and the bright-eyed optimism of my students, who saw me as a beacon of knowledge and professionalism. I had a beautiful, sun-drenched apartment in the city's historic district, a space I had poured my heart and soul into designing. My life felt both purposeful and comfortable, a testament to years of hard work and quiet determination. At the center of it all was Michael. We had been together for 3 years, engaged for 1, and our wedding was set for June 15th, a date I had once believed would mark the beginning of our forever. Michael was an architect, a fact he was always keen to remind me of. He was tall and handsome, with a confident, almost arrogant air about him that I had initially mistaken for self-assurance. He worked for a high-profile firm, designing sleek, modern skyscrapers that scraped the sky. When we met, I was captivated by his ambition and his grand vision for the future. He seemed to embody the kind of success I had always admired from a distance, and I thought he was the missing piece to my own quiet academic puzzle. People called us a power couple, the professor and the architect. It had a nice ring to it, but behind closed doors, our relationship was a little different. Michael had a knack for subtle condescension, a habit of making me feel small in the grand scheme of his world. He'd laughingly refer to my work as playing with children while boasting about his latest multi-million-dollar project. "Sharon, darling," he'd say, raising an eyebrow over his martini glass at a dinner party, "my work shapes cities. Yours shapes finger painters." It was always said with a charming smile, so everyone else just thought it was playful banter. But the sting was real, a small, quiet pinprick of disrespect that I always chose to ignore. I told myself he was just proud, that he didn't mean any harm. I loved him, and I believed he loved me. I was wrong. My world was also anchored by Leona, my younger cousin. She was 25, a newly minted kindergarten teacher fresh out of college, and the closest thing I had to a sister. Our families were intertwined, our childhoods a shared tapestry of holidays, secrets, and late-night talks. When she decided to pursue a career in education, I was her biggest cheerleader. I mentored her through her student teaching, helped her land her first job at the prestigious private school where many of my own students did their practicums, and even helped her find an apartment a few blocks from mine. She was bright, bubbly, and seemed to idolize me. "Sharon," she would say, her eyes wide with admiration, "I want to be just like you one day. You have it all." The compliments felt genuine, a soothing balm for the quiet doubts Michael's comments sometimes stirred. She threw herself into my wedding planning with a fierce, almost obsessive energy. She was my maid of honor, my confidant, my right hand. She spent hours with me picking out linens, tasting cake, and debating the merits of peonies versus roses. We planned the ceremony at the beautiful old St. Mark's Cathedral, a place Michael had always admired. "You deserve this, Sharon," she told me once, holding my hand as we flipped through a wedding magazine. You're the kindest person I know. Michael is so lucky to have you. The words were an echo of what I had told myself for so long. I trusted her completely. I trusted them both. The months leading up to the wedding were a whirlwind of final fittings, last-minute details, and growing excitement. My parents, who had always been my rock, were over the moon. My father, a man of few words, would catch my eye and offer a small, proud smile. My mother would tear up every time she saw my wedding dress hanging in the closet, a simple, elegant sheath with a flowing train that made me feel like a queen. I had been so focused on the logistics, on the meticulous planning that was so ingrained in my personality, that I missed the small cracks appearing in the foundation of my life. Michael started working late more often, claiming he was putting in extra hours on a new skyscraper project. He was distant, distracted, his phone always face down on the table. When I asked him about it, he'd dismiss my concerns with a wave of his hand. Just stress, Sharon. The pressure is immense. You wouldn't understand. I didn't push. I just accepted his explanation because that's what I did. I was a problem solver, a nurturer. I told myself I needed to be supportive, not demanding. Leona, too, started acting differently. She became possessive of my time with Michael, always finding a reason to be with us, subtly inserting herself into our conversations. She would bring up my work in a way that seemed to belittle it, even if she framed it as a compliment. "Oh, Sharon, you're so good with the kids. I could never manage a whole department like you do. It must be so simple though, right? Like, teaching your students how to color inside the lines?" A small, innocent comment, a quiet, venomous jab. I brushed it off, chalking it up to her own professional insecurities. I was her mentor, after all. It was my job to lift her up, not to question her. I was so consumed with the fairy tale I was building that I completely ignored the signs that the walls were crumbling around me. I was the architect of my own life, yet I had failed to see the rot in the very beams I was building on. I was so convinced of my own happiness that I became blind to the truth. A truth that was being whispered in hushed tones, hidden in plain sight, and now was about to be screamed for the world to hear. The night before the wedding, I was in my apartment, going over the final checklist with my mother. My father and Michael were at a golf club with the groomsmen. Leona was out with the bridesmaids at a wine bar. My mom was running through the seating chart, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Are you sure you want Uncle Richard next to the Thompsons, Sharon? They had that little incident at the family reunion last year." My mind was elsewhere. I was thinking about the vows Michael and I had written. I was thinking about our future, our plans for a home, our dream of starting a family. I was thinking about the beautiful Montessori center I was planning to open, a project Michael had reluctantly promised to help me with. I had secured the funding, found the perfect building, and had even drawn up some initial blueprints myself. It was the culmination of everything I had ever worked for, my legacy. The only thing missing was the final sign-off from Michael, who insisted on reviewing every detail before we went to the bank. I went to bed that night with a smile on my face, dreaming of walking down the aisle towards my future. A future that I believed was perfect, secure, and built on a foundation of love and trust. But some foundations, I would soon discover, are nothing more than dust and lies. June 15th dawned bright and clear, with the promise of a perfect summer day. I woke up in my childhood bedroom, per tradition. The house was already a hive of activity. My mom was in the kitchen, stress baking enough cookies to feed a small army. My dad was on the phone, his voice carrying that tone he used when he was trying to solve a problem, likely with the limo service. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Michael. "Morning, beautiful. See you soon, future Mrs. Michael." I smiled, my heart fluttering. "Morning, Mr. Architect. Can't wait to see you at the altar." Another text, this one from Leona. "Wedding day. Can't believe it's finally here. Getting my hair done now? Then I'll be over to help you get ready. It's going to be the most beautiful day ever." The words, in retrospect, were dripping with a cruel, delicious irony I couldn't have possibly understood at the time. The morning flew by in a blur of hairspray, makeup brushes, and nervous laughter. The photographer captured every moment as my bridesmaids, Leona, my sister Sarah, and my cousin Lily, helped me transform into a bride. My dress, a simple but elegant sheath, felt like a second skin. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back at me. She was radiant, glowing with an inner light I hadn't seen in years. At noon, we were loading into the cars to head to the cathedral. I felt surprisingly calm. All the planning was done. All the decisions were made. I had a few moments of quiet reflection in the back of the car, with my mom holding my hand, her eyes shining with tears of joy. I was marrying the man I loved, surrounded by the people who loved me. What could possibly go wrong? As we pulled up to the church, my heart began to pound. I was finally here. The next time I walked, it would be toward a new life. But as I was about to get out of the car, my phone buzzed. It was my wedding coordinator, a calm, unflappable woman named Linda. "Sharon, honey, quick question. I can't find the vendor contracts for the reception. They're not in the folder you gave me. I have the church contracts, but not the reception ones. I know you're busy, but is there any chance they're at your place?" A knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach. The reception contracts, the catering, the band, the flower delivery, all of them in a single folder, sitting on my desk back at my apartment. I had been so worried about leaving my vows behind that I had completely forgotten to pack the most important folder of all. "Oh my God, Linda," I said, my voice filled with dismay. "I completely forgot to put them in the bag." "They're on my desk in the study." "No problem, honey," she said, her voice still calm. "I can send my assistant to get them." But I shook my head. My apartment was in a historic building with a complex security system. The key was in my bag, but the codes were in my head. I didn't want anyone else to go. "No, Linda, I'll get them. It's on the way to the venue. Just tell my dad I'll be a few minutes late. He'll understand." I turned to my mom. "Mom, the reception contracts are at home. I have to go get them. It'll only take me a minute." My mom looked at me with a worried expression. "Sharon, honey, you're in your wedding dress. We can send Sarah." "No, Mom," I said, a rare note of firmness in my voice. "It's fine. I'll go myself. I need a minute anyway." I grabbed the keys from my bag and a trusted friend, my longtime confidant and co-worker Martha, offered to drive me. "I'll go with you, Sharon. You're too beautiful to be driving alone on your wedding day." The drive back to my apartment felt like a surreal journey through my own life. The city streets, once so familiar, seemed to shimmer in a haze of anticipation and nerves. My heart was a drumbeat in my chest. I thought about Michael, about Leona, about the family and friends waiting for me. I couldn't help but smile. Thinking of the grand surprise I had for Michael at our reception, a presentation announcing my new Montessori Center project, a project I was hoping he would finally be proud of. It was my gift to him, a testament to my own success, a way of showing him that my work was just as important as his. I was still so naive, so blind to the truth. We pulled up to my building. The security guard, a kind old man named Frank, who had known me for years, smiled and waved. "Good luck, Miss Sharon. You look radiant." "Thank you, Frank," I said, my voice full of genuine happiness. "I'll be right back." As I took the elevator up to my floor, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. I would get the contracts, rush back to the church, and walk down the aisle to my perfect life. I was a professional, after all. A little hiccup wasn't going to ruin my day. I walked down the long, carpeted hallway, the sound of my heels clicking against the marble floor echoing in the silence. My apartment was at the end of the hall. The front door a beautiful solid oak that I had helped Michael choose. I slid my key into the lock, the sound of the tumbler turning a familiar click. I pushed the door open, ready to go to my study and grab the folder. The apartment was dim, the curtains still drawn from the night before. But as I stepped inside, I heard something. A sound from my bedroom. A soft laugh, followed by a low murmur. My heart, which had just moments ago been so peaceful, now began to pound with a frantic, desperate rhythm. Michael was supposed to be at the church. Leona was supposed to be with the bridesmaids. My mind, ever the professor, raced through all the logical explanations. Maybe Michael forgot something and came back. Maybe Leona stopped by to get something and Michael was here helping her. Maybe. But deep down, in a place I didn't want to acknowledge, I already knew the truth. I dropped my clutch on the floor, the sound a small, insignificant thud in the silence. The floorboards were cold beneath my feet. I walked slowly, almost as if in a trance, toward my bedroom. The door was ajar. I pushed it open just enough to see inside. And then, my world didn't just burn. It was doused in a bitter, icy water that left me frozen, numb, and unable to breathe. On my bed, the bed I had picked out, the bed I had shared with Michael, the bed I thought was a sanctuary of our love, were Michael and Leona. They were tangled in the sheets. Naked and asleep, a half-empty bottle of champagne on my nightstand. Her long, dark hair was spread across his pillow, and his arm was wrapped possessively around her waist. They looked like a couple who had spent the night in bliss, not like a groom and his cousin-in-law on their wedding day. I stood there, frozen in my beautiful white silk dress, the symbol of a pure, unconditional love, now stained with the ugliest kind of betrayal. All the air left my lungs. The room spun. All I could see were two people, the two people I had trusted with my entire life, caught in a moment of pure, unadulterated sin. And in that moment, the quiet, gentle professor I had been for 35 years died. In her place, a new person was born. A person who knew that vengeance was not a weakness, but a weapon. A person who was about to show everyone what it truly meant to be an architect. The silence was a thick, suffocating blanket. I stood there, a bride in white silk, an uninvited guest in the ruins of my own life. Michael's arm was still wrapped around Leona, his head buried in her hair, both of them oblivious. The champagne bottle on the nightstand gleamed in the dim light. I could see the label. Dom Perignon, 2012 vintage, the same bottle we had planned to open on our wedding night. The irony was a cold, sharp stab. My mind, that meticulously organized machine, refused to process emotion. It simply went to work. It began to catalog, to analyze, to put the pieces together. The late nights, the phone face down on the table, the subtle mockery of my career, the way Leona had always managed to be present. I hadn't been blind. I had simply refused to see. My love, my trust, had been a thick filter, turning their blatant lies into harmless quirks. But now, the filter was gone, and the truth was a blinding, ugly light. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. My hands, which had been so careful with my wedding dress, were now balled into tight fists, nails digging into my palms. The physical pain was a grounding anchor in the swirling chaos. I wanted to turn and run. I wanted to go to the church, to tell everyone what had happened, to let my mother's arms hold me as I finally broke down. But a cold, hard voice in my head, the voice of the professor, told me that was a mistake. That was the response of a victim, and I was done being a victim. I slowly backed away from the door, careful not to make a sound. I retrieved my clutch from the floor and carefully, quietly, let myself out of the apartment. I shut the door, the soft click of the lock feeling like the final nail in the coffin of my old life. Martha, my friend and colleague, was waiting for me in the car. I got in, my body moving on autopilot. "Sharon, honey, are you okay? You look pale," she said, her voice full of concern. I looked at her kind, worried eyes, and knew I couldn't tell her the truth. Not yet. The information I had was a weapon, and I needed to handle it with the precision of a surgeon. "I'm fine, Martha," I said, my voice sounding hollow and alien. "I just forgot the folder. It's on my desk. I'll go back up." Martha looked at me, her expression a mix of confusion and worry. "Sharon, you're not well. Let me get it for you." But I was already out of the car, my heart pounding with a new kind of rhythm. It wasn't fear or heartbreak. It was pure, unadulterated resolve. "No, Martha. I've got it. Just wait here." I walked back to the front door, my mind a storm of thoughts and possibilities. This time, I was moving with a new purpose. My love for Michael, my trust in Leona, had been a veil. Now that the veil was torn, I could finally see the true faces of the people I had surrounded myself with. Michael wasn't just a partner. He was an ambitious, self-serving narcissist who saw me as an accessory to his perfect life. Leona wasn't a sweet, admiring cousin. She was a greedy, envious monster who wanted to take everything I had. My carefully crafted, peaceful life was nothing more than a stage for their malicious play. I re-entered my apartment, a silent phantom in my own home. I went straight to my study. The laptop Michael used for his personal affairs was sitting open on my desk. I sat down, my fingers flying across the keyboard with a speed I didn't know I possessed. I wasn't just a professor. I was a detail-oriented, methodical professional who had spent years organizing and analyzing data. I began to search. I opened his email. I searched for Leona's name. Dozens of emails appeared, dating back for months. Flirtatious emails at first, then more explicit ones. Conversations about their secret and their future. But what stopped me dead in my tracks, what made the blood run cold in my veins, was a conversation about me, about my work, about my Montessori center. Michael to Leona. "I'm still trying to get her to sign over the final blueprint for the Montessori project. She's so attached to it, like it's a living thing. It's a gold mine, babe. With my connections, we can make a fortune on that without her even knowing." Leona to Michael. "I know. The minute the ink is dry, we can get started. She's so naive. She thinks her little finger-painting school is going to change the world. It's hilarious." The words were a physical blow. It wasn't just about the affair. It was about my work, my passion, my legacy. They weren't just betraying my heart. They were trying to steal my future. My anger, which had been a quiet, simmering ember, now roared into a blazing inferno. They thought I was a fool. They thought my work was a joke. They thought they could simply take what was mine. I wasn't a fool. I was a professor who had spent years teaching the importance of documentation, of evidence, of legal precedent. I was a woman who had meticulously organized every contract, every email, every detail of my life. My mind, now sharp and focused, began to formulate a plan. I wasn't going to have a tearful confrontation. I wasn't going to throw a glass of water in their faces. I was going to dismantle their lives with the same methodical precision they had used to try and dismantle mine. I opened a new email to my personal lawyer, a brilliant woman named Clara, who specialized in property law and intellectual property. I quickly drafted an email with a subject line that would immediately catch her attention. Urgent. Marital and intellectual property fraud. I attached screenshots of the incriminating emails, the messages, and the rough drafts of my Montessori project. I wrote a concise, professional message outlining my current situation. A fiancé and a cousin, caught in an affair on our wedding day, and an apparent conspiracy to steal my intellectual property. I ended with a clear command. Please prepare a comprehensive legal strategy. I want to sue for breach of contract, intellectual property theft, and emotional distress. I need a preliminary injunction to block any and all transactions related to my Montessori project. I need to be in control of this situation. I will call you immediately. I hit send. Then I logged into Michael's phone, using the password I had seen him type 100 times. There, I found the final piece of the puzzle, a text from Michael to his business partner, bragging about the wedding and their plans to open a new firm together, a firm that would be built on the very blueprints he was trying to steal from me. Another screenshot, another email to Clara. I stood up, feeling a new kind of power surging through me. The old Sharon, the gentle professor, was gone. In her place was a new person, a strategist, a woman who understood that the rules of engagement had changed. This wasn't a game of emotions. It was a game of strategy, of law, of power. They had made a fatal mistake. They had underestimated me. They had seen a kind, quiet woman who played with children. They had failed to see the sharp, intellectual force behind the facade. I took a final look around my apartment, at the beautiful space that was no longer mine. It was a crime scene, a monument to their deceit. I needed to get back to the church. I needed to be where I was supposed to be, but with a new script. My plan was simple, yet devastating. I wasn't going to let them off with a private confrontation. I was going to force them to face their sins in front of the very people they had lied to. I returned to the car where Martha was waiting, still looking worried. "Everything okay, Sharon?" she asked. I smiled, a cold, hard smile that I was sure didn't reach my eyes. "Everything is perfect, Martha. I just needed to take care of one small, final detail." The drive back to the church was a blur. My mind was racing, but it wasn't with heartbreak. It was with a cold, calculating fury. My phone rang. It was Michael. "Hey, babe. Just checking in. Sorry I didn't text you back earlier. My phone died." His voice was full of a fake, saccharine sweetness that I now recognized as a lie. "That's okay," I said, my voice completely flat. "I'm on my way now. I'll see you at the altar." I hung up, a chilling sense of control washing over me. He had no idea. He had no idea what I had just done. He had no idea that the one small detail I had taken care of was a legal injunction against his career, a lawsuit that would dismantle his life, brick by brick. And Leona, my sweet, naive cousin, was about to discover the full cost of her jealousy. She had wanted to be me. She had wanted my life, my man, my legacy. Soon, she would have a front row seat to the dramatic implosion of the life she had so desperately tried to steal, and I was going to be the one pulling the strings. I was no longer a bride waiting for her groom. I was a judge, and my courtroom was about to open. I arrived back at St. Mark's Cathedral in a daze, but my mind was clearer than ever. The beautiful building, with its towering Gothic spires and stained glass windows, no longer looked like a house of worship. It looked like a stage, and the 300 guests milling about in the courtyard were my audience. My heart, which had been a drumbeat of frantic energy just an hour ago, was now a cold, steady thud. I was no longer a nervous bride. I was an executioner, and I had come to deliver the sentence. I stepped out of the car, my beautiful wedding dress feeling heavy, but my spirit was light. My mother rushed over, her face a mask of worry. "Sharon, honey, are you okay? You were gone so long. We've been trying to call you." "Where's Michael?" she whispered, her voice frantic. My father's jaw was set, a clear sign of his own barely contained anger. My sister Sarah and cousin Lily looked at me with confusion, their faces mirroring the tension that was now palpable in the air. I held up a hand, a gesture of calm that surprised even me. "I'm fine, Mom. I'm so sorry. There was a little issue with the contracts, but everything's sorted now." I gave her a small, tight smile that I hoped looked reassuring. "Where's Michael?" The words were ice on my tongue. "He's waiting inside, honey. He's been worried sick," my mother said, gesturing toward the doors. "He said his phone died." I nodded, a little bitter laugh bubbling up in my throat. Of course, the liar's excuse. I walked toward the grand entrance, my entourage of worried family members trailing behind me. As I moved, I saw Michael emerge from the shadows of the narthex. His face was a mixture of relief and panic. He hurried toward me. A practiced, charming smile plastered on his face. "Sharon, babe, thank God you're okay. I was so worried. My phone died and I couldn't reach you. What happened?" He tried to take my hand, but I pulled it away. "The contracts," I said, my voice low and devoid of emotion. "I had to go back to the apartment to get them." His face went white. He knew. He knew I knew. For a brief, terrifying moment, I saw the mask slip. The charming facade melted away, revealing the panicked, ugly man beneath. He tried to recover, his eyes darting around at the gathering crowd. "Oh, thank goodness! I'm so glad you got them. Now, let's get you inside, my love. We have a wedding to get to." He tried to put his arm around my waist, but I pulled away again. "Not yet, Michael," I said, my voice carrying a quiet authority that silenced the murmuring crowd. "I think there's something we need to discuss first." Leona, who had been standing with the rest of the bridesmaids, now walked over, her face a picture of faux concern. "Sharon, are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. Everything's ready. We can still do this," she said, her voice a little too loud, a little too strained. I looked at her, at the woman who had shared my secrets, my dreams, my family. "I'm fine, Leona," I said, my eyes boring into hers. "You, on the other hand, are about to see one." The color drained from her face, her carefully constructed mask of innocence crumbling to dust. Michael, sensing the danger, tried to take control. "Sharon, what is this? We need to go. Everyone is waiting." But I was already walking toward the center of the courtyard, where the microphone for the musicians was set up. I took the microphone in my hand, the cool metal feeling like a scepter of power. The crowd, sensing the change in atmosphere, fell silent. The wedding music stopped. The only sound was the wind rustling through the trees and the frantic beating of my own heart. "Thank you all for coming today," I began, my voice clear and steady, amplified by the microphone. "I know you've all been waiting for the main event, and I promise it's a spectacle you won't soon forget." I paused, my eyes scanning the crowd. I saw my parents, my friends, my colleagues from the college. I saw the faces of the people who had come to celebrate a love story, completely unaware they were about to witness a crime being exposed. "There will be no wedding today," I announced, the words hanging in the air like a death knell. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. My mother's hand flew to her mouth, and I saw my father take a protective step toward me. Michael, his face a mask of fury and humiliation, tried to grab the microphone from my hand. "Sharon, what are you doing? This is insane! Everyone, this is a joke, a misunderstanding!" I sidestepped him, my gaze fixed on the crowd. "No, Michael, this is not a joke. It's not a misunderstanding. This is the truth." I pulled out my phone, a small, unassuming object that held the power to shatter their lives. "And I have the evidence to prove it." I held up the phone, showing them the screenshot of the email I had sent to my lawyer. "I have just filed a lawsuit for fraud, theft of intellectual property, and emotional distress against Michael Bennett and Leona Hayes." The crowd erupted. Whispers, gasps, shocked exclamations filled the air. I looked over at Leona, who had her hands clasped over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. "Sharon, please," she whimpered. "You don't understand. We can explain." But I wasn't done. The real climax was yet to come. "Oh, I understand perfectly, Leona," I said, a cruel smile playing on my lips. "I understand that you wanted to take my life. You wanted my job, my man, my home. You wanted my legacy. You thought I was a fool." I turned back to the crowd, to Michael's parents, to his boss, to his colleagues who had come to the wedding. "What you don't understand is that this isn't just about a broken engagement." Michael and Leona were in my bed this morning, not just because they were having an affair, but because they were celebrating. Celebrating the fact that they were about to steal my life's work. They were about to take my blueprints for my new Montessori center and use my ideas to build a business of their own. The crowd was silent now, hanging on my every word. Their faces a mixture of shock and disgust. "So, here's what's going to happen," I said, my voice ringing out with authority. "There will be no wedding today, but the food is paid for, the band is here, and I refuse to let this tragedy be a waste. So, I invite you all to stay and celebrate the fact that I have dodged the biggest bullet of my life." I raised my hand and gestured to the band leader, a man who had known my family for years. He looked at me, a silent question in his eyes. I nodded. He gave me a small, conspiratorial smile, and then the music started. Not wedding music, but the triumphant chords of a jazz band, a song of celebration and defiance. I turned back to Michael and Leona. They were standing there, their faces pale and their world crumbling around them. Michael's parents were looking at him with a mixture of shame and anger. "You, Michael Bennett, are no longer my future. You are a liar and a thief. And you, Leona Hayes, are no longer my family." I paused, looking directly into her eyes. "You wanted my life. Now you can have what's left of it. The lawsuits, the public humiliation, the utter destruction of your reputations. Enjoy." With that, I turned my back on them and walked toward the reception. A free woman, a victorious warrior, a professor who had finally taught the ultimate lesson. The clapping started slowly, then grew into a thunderous applause. I had unmasked the liars, exposed the traitors, and in doing so, I had finally, truly, become the architect of my own destiny. The applause was deafening. It wasn't the polite, quiet clapping of a wedding congregation. It was the roar of a crowd, a wave of support and shock that washed over me as I stood there in my ruined wedding dress. I had dropped the microphone, its metal body thudding softly onto the grass, the sound swallowed by the cheers. Michael and Leona were standing in the middle of the courtyard, frozen, their faces pale. Their carefully constructed world now a pile of rubble around them. I didn't look at them again. My job there was done. My father was the first to reach me. He wrapped his arms around me, holding me in a fierce, protective embrace. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart," he whispered into my hair, his voice thick with emotion. My mother was next, her tears of joy and relief now flowing freely. She held my face in her hands, her eyes filled with a love so pure. It was a balm to my shattered soul. "I knew there was something wrong," she said, her voice shaking. I didn't want to believe it." The rest of the guests followed, a slow-moving river of support. My sister Sarah and cousin Lily hugged me tight, their faces a mixture of fury and admiration. Colleagues from the college, who had always known me as a quiet, professional professor, now looked at me with a newfound respect. A respected senior faculty member, Dr. Evans, put a comforting hand on my shoulder. "Sharon, that took incredible courage. Your integrity is truly inspiring." The band, a group of old family friends, had transitioned from the jazz number to a more upbeat, celebratory song. The mood was shifting from shock to defiance, from heartbreak to empowerment. I was no longer a victim. I was a hero. I was no longer a bride. I was the architect of my own liberation. Michael's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Bennett, approached me, their faces etched with a profound sense of shame and horror. Mrs. Bennett's eyes were red from crying. "Sharon," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "I am so sorry. I raised him better than this. He's not the son I thought I raised." I looked at her, and in her eyes I saw genuine pain. I didn't hold her accountable for her son's actions. I reached out and gently squeezed her hand. "This isn't your fault, Mrs. Bennett. You're a good woman. And you have a wonderful daughter, Katie, who I know would never do this." She hugged me, a long, tearful embrace that spoke volumes. It was an apology from a mother, a broken heart reaching out to another. Katie, Michael's sister and one of my bridesmaids, lingered after her parents had left. The pain in her eyes was almost unbearable. "Sharon, I swear to you," she said, her voice fierce, "I had no idea. He always said he was working late on a new project. I can't believe he would do this. To you, to our family." I hugged her tightly. "I know, Katie. I know you didn't." "He's still your brother, but you don't have to defend what he did." "I would never," she said, her voice firm. "What he did was unforgivable. I'm ashamed to call him my brother." I was still in the middle of the crowd, receiving hugs and words of encouragement, when I saw my phone screen light up with an incoming call from Clara, my lawyer. I excused myself and walked to a quiet corner. "Clara?" I said, my voice low. "It's Sharon." "Sharon, what on earth is going on?" she asked, her voice a mix of awe and concern. "The emails, the documents. I've put in the injunction. The moment they try to sell or use your design, they'll be in serious legal trouble. And the lawsuit for breach of contract and emotional distress is ready to go. We're going to hit them hard." I felt a shiver of satisfaction. I had not just exposed them, I had legally dismantled them. Later, as the afternoon wore on, a surreal, almost magical transformation occurred. What should have been the worst day of my life was turning into an impromptu celebration of my freedom. The meticulously planned wedding reception became a dodge-a-bullet party. People toasted me with champagne, telling stories of their own close calls and moments of self-realization. The atmosphere was vibrant, joyful, and incredibly supportive. My old professor and mentor, Dr. Alice Green, who had been an inspiration to me for years, found me in the middle of the garden. "Sharon, my dear," she said, her eyes crinkling with a wise smile. "I've always told you that your greatest strength is not your intellect, but your integrity. You chose to face the fire instead of running from it. That's true leadership. I'm so incredibly proud of you. I've always thought of you as the future of this field. Today, you proved that you're not just the future. You are the present." Her words were a powerful affirmation, a confirmation that I was on the right path, even as my old one had crumbled. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the grounds, I took a moment to reflect. I was surrounded by people who loved me, who respected me, who saw my worth not because I was a bride, but because I was Sharon. My phone was buzzing with texts, not from Michael or Leona, but from my father, my sister, and my friends. The messages were simple, but they were everything. "We're here for you. We love you. You did the right thing." The next day, I woke up in my childhood bedroom, but it wasn't the same. I was a different person. I was no longer the girl who had dreamt of a fairy tale wedding. I was a woman who had faced her demons and won. My first call was to a moving company. I couldn't stay in the apartment. It was a monument to their lies, a place where a part of me had died. It was time to start fresh. I found a new, smaller, cozier apartment in a different neighborhood, a place that was just mine, a space where I could finally begin to heal. The lawsuit was brutal, but it was my revenge. Clara, my lawyer, was relentless. We used the emails, the screenshots, the phone records. We proved that Michael had not only engaged in an affair with my cousin, but that they had conspired to steal my intellectual property and use my money to fund their own project. The public humiliation was immediate and widespread. My story was picked up by local news, then national news. I was no longer just a professor. I was a symbol of strength and integrity. Michael's architectural firm fired him, and he was professionally blacklisted. Leona was asked to resign from her school. They lost everything: their jobs, their reputations, and their futures. They were forced to sell their assets to pay for the lawsuit, which they lost spectacularly. I was awarded a significant amount in damages, money that I decided would be put toward my dreams. I received a final email from Michael a few weeks later. It was a pathetic, half-hearted attempt at an apology, blaming me for ruining his life and calling me cold and calculating. I didn't respond. He had no power over me anymore. I had moved on. My focus was on healing, on rebuilding. I spent my days at my new apartment, sorting through my life, piece by piece. The wedding contracts, the seating charts, the fabric swatches. They were all tossed in the trash. I replaced them with books on advanced educational theory, blueprints for my new Montessori center, and blank canvases for a new painting hobby I had picked up. My life wasn't just being rebuilt, it was being transformed. The quiet, self-doubting woman who had let a man and a cousin define her worth was gone. In her place was a woman who was learning to listen to her own voice, to trust her own judgment, to value her own happiness. The emotional scars were still there, of course. But they weren't a source of shame. They were a testament to my resilience. They were a reminder of the day I stopped being a victim and started being an architect of my own destiny. The falling action wasn't a descent into sorrow. It was an ascent into freedom. And I was just getting started. The year that followed my wedding day was a symphony of reconstruction. I had left the city, the painful memories, and the ghosts of my past behind. The lawsuit was settled in my favor, and the significant damages I received were not just a financial victory. They were a profound emotional validation. They were a testament to my worth, a confirmation that my intellect, my passion, and my work were not just finger painting, but a valuable, protectable asset. I took that money and did what I had always planned to do, but this time, it was for me, and only for me. I moved to a small, picturesque town with a prestigious graduate program in early childhood development. I enrolled in the PhD program, dedicating myself entirely to my studies. The quiet hours I spent in the library, the late nights poring over research papers, the intellectual stimulation of my classes, it was all a profound form of healing. I was building a new life, brick by brick, foundation by foundation, and this time, every single part of it was mine. I used the rest of the settlement money to bring my dream to life. I bought a beautiful old building, a former library with huge windows and a sprawling garden. I hired a team of talented, honest architects, people who respected my vision and my expertise. I spent my days designing, collaborating, and building the Sharon Hayes Montessori Institute, a state-of-the-art training center for early childhood educators. I poured all of my passion, my knowledge, and my love for the profession into every detail. It was my legacy, my monument to resilience, a beacon of hope born from the ashes of my old life. I didn't hear from Michael or Leona again. The last I heard, they had both left the city in disgrace. Michael was professionally ruined. His career as an architect, a distant, tarnished memory. Leona was unable to find another teaching job and had moved back in with her parents. Their carefully constructed plan had collapsed in on them, and they were left with nothing but the rubble of their own deceit. I didn't feel a sense of vindictive joy. Instead, I felt a quiet, profound sense of peace. Their fate was not my concern. My focus was on my own journey, on the beautiful life I was creating. 2 years after that fateful day, I stood on the stage of my newly opened institute, delivering the commencement speech for the first graduating class. The room was filled with proud students, their parents, and my own family, who had stood by me through everything. My father was in the front row, his eyes shining with pride. My mother was next to him, her hand linked with his, her face a picture of serene happiness. The woman who had once stood in a torn wedding dress, her world in tatters, was now a doctor, a business owner, a leader in her field. I looked out at the faces of the young women I had trained and saw a reflection of my own journey. I stand before you today, I began, my voice clear and confident. Not as the woman who was betrayed, but as the woman who was set free. 2 years ago, I thought my life was over. I thought losing a man and a friend meant losing everything. But in that moment of profound darkness, I learned a vital truth. You cannot lose what is truly yours. The love I have for my work, the passion I have for teaching, the integrity that defines who I am, those things can never be stolen. They can never be betrayed. They are the true foundation of your life. After the ceremony, as I was walking through the gardens of the Institute, a man approached me. He was a kind, steady presence, with a warm smile and eyes that held a genuine respect for me and my work. His name was Daniel, a successful landscape architect I had hired to design the gardens for my institute. We had spent months working together, and I had come to admire his calm demeanor, his quiet strength, and his profound respect for the world around him. He wasn't flashy or arrogant. He was kind, honest, and truly saw me for who I was, an architect of my own life. We had been dating for 6 months now, taking things slow, building something real and honest. He took my hand, his thumb tracing a gentle circle on my palm. "That was a beautiful speech, Dr. Hayes," he said, his voice full of warmth. "You are an inspiration." I smiled, a genuine, joyful smile that reached my eyes. Thank you, Daniel. I meant every word. As we stood there, surrounded by the beautiful gardens he had designed in the institute I had built, I realized that I had not just recovered from the betrayal. I had transcended it. My life wasn't just back on track, it was a masterpiece. I often think back to that terrible, wonderful day. The day I found my fiancé in bed with my cousin. The day I made that phone call. The day I stood up in my wedding dress and chose myself. I used to think the pain was a burden. But now, I know it was a gift. It was a catalyst for change, a force that propelled me toward a life I never could have imagined. I am not a victim. I am an architect. I am a leader. And I am whole. And that is my message to you. To anyone who has ever felt broken, who has ever had their trust shattered, who has ever been made to feel small, your worth is not tied to a relationship. It is not defined by a title. It is not dependent on anyone else's approval. Your worth is in your strength, your integrity, your courage to stand up for yourself, even when your world is falling apart. The best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's the moment you stop letting someone else define your happiness and start building your own. It's the moment you realize that the most important choice you will ever make is to choose yourself. Thank you for listening to my story. What part of Sharon's story resonated with you the most? Let comment below. If you're new here and want to hear more stories of betrayal, revenge, and empowerment, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Your support helps us bring these incredible tales to life. And don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if Sharon's courage inspired you today. Thank you.